be sincerely blessed with the lineup that we have and the lineup of topics. And I'm really looking forward to all three of these. These were ones that I picked. So, I'm feeling a little selfish, but I think I'm going to be glad I did. So, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming, and we have competing events with our church in Dodge Center. We're the ones who live stream and record, so I can't tell you the number of people that said, "Are these being recorded? Can I watch them later?" So, because they're trying to take advantage of both. And so before we kick off our meetings, I just want to have a quick word of prayer, and then we'll bring up Dr. Dysinger and talk about health and community. So just a quick word of prayer. Oh, Heavenly Father, once again, we just thank you for this opportunity to learn, to be blessed, and to be a blessing. Bless us now, we pray in Christ's name. Amen. All right, Dr. Dysinger, are you ready to go?
I am.
All right. Do you need a...
So is this working?
Yes.
Okay. So it's good to be here. It's good to see some familiar faces. So I'm going to try to do something. I'm going to try to tell. So this first talk is it's about community. And to me, you enter community in stories and connections and things like that. So I'm going to try to tell stories as this talk. So this talk is going to be a story talk. My next talk is going to be more science, but this one's going to be story with a little science in there. And so I'm going to tell 5 stories, and I'm going to tell them sort of all at the same time. So I made a little bit of a template here. So when I'm talking about the Pentecost community, it'll be here. Wayne's Pain Gain will be here. Blue Zones will be here. Your story will be here, and Blue Zones Health will be here. So hopefully you can keep up. We'll see how it goes. See how quick you are after a Saturday lunch. So this is a church. So I'm going to start off with some biblical passages here. So this is a biblical passage from the Pentecost movement, the Pentecost community. So just to remind ourselves, the Pentecost community were those disciples and other followers of Jesus that were trying to figure out what to do after Jesus died. And so this is a quote from Acts 2:42 and 43, describing that Pentecost community. So it says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship and to the breaking of bread and the prayers, and awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through those apostles." So, highlighting a couple words. So this was a real community, right? So it was fellowship. We're talking about health and community, and so this was a real community. And in this community, there was awe and wonder going on. So it was not just a low-key community. This was a community that was pretty powerful. This was a community that was doing pretty major things. In fact, I think you can make a case that this community, this Pentecost community, was the most powerful community that ever existed, because it was out of this community that Christianity took off, and it was out of this Christian community that Christianity became the largest and most influential religion in the world. So a pretty powerful community. And every soul, everybody in this community was involved. So the awe and the wonder was everybody in the community was participating. But think about where that community came from. So Jesus had just died, so this was their spiritual leader. He just passed away. And when he passed away, there was a lot of confusion, right? So nobody knew exactly what was going on. So here's a quote from Luke. The disciples, the men, didn't believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Another passage a little later on in Luke 24, they were foolish and slow of heart. So there was Thomas was doubting. There was contention. What's really going on? And Jesus actually rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe as they were going forward as he was going back to heaven. So it was a community that had lost their leader. It was a community that was confused. It was a community that was in a lot of pain. It was a community that was backbiting each other, not believing each other. It was a community that was pretty broken, right? It was not what you would call a strong community. But out of this community came the awe and wonder. So I'm going to tell a story about my community, one of my communities. So this story starts when I was 42 years old, so about 20 years ago. And I was the chair of preventive medicine at Loma Linda University. I'd recently been appointed chair. Loma Linda University is a university that's known for lifestyle medicine, known for its approaches to health. And preventive medicine is like one of the preeminent departments that's there for health reasons. And I went and got my cholesterol done, and my good cholesterol was really low. It was 32, which, if you know anything about good cholesterol, you want it high, you don't want it low. And you can make it higher, and the main way that you make it higher is you exercise. And at 42, I exercised. I would go out and run. And I would usually run a couple miles, and I would usually do that maybe a couple times a week. I'd say I would do it 5 days a week, but I wouldn't in reality. When I went out and ran, I ran by myself. So I saw this HDL cholesterol, and I was actually ashamed. I was embarrassed because I thought the chair of preventive medicine at Loma Linda University shouldn't have a good cholesterol that was low. So, I knew the science. I knew that the thing I needed to do was to exercise more. So I thought about a patient of mine. His name was Dexter Emoto. And Dexter would come in and he'd say, "Wayne, you've got to join the Lopers." So there's a running club in Loma Linda. It's called the Loma Linda Lopers. And I knew about them. They would meet on Sunday mornings, and they would all go out and run together. And he says, he would come in saying, "Wayne, you got to join the Lopers." And then I had a faculty member who was a part of the Lopers, and so I knew that they existed. So when my cholesterol came back at 32, I said, "Okay, I'm going to have to join the Lopers." Well, the Lopers are actually a marathon clinic, so they actually train you to run marathons. And so they start training in like July and August, and they usually run a marathon in March. So I went there. I think I joined like in September, and I'll never forget the first time I went there. First thing is, it was in a gym. You walked into the gym, and they had these boom boxes going, and everyone was doing their stretching exercises. And I was like, I think I'm joining a cult, because everybody was doing their own thing. And then, they have different pace groups, so you choose which group you want to run with. So I chose a group that I thought I could keep up with, and we were starting to run. This group, we were doing a mile in 11 minutes, and as we were starting, I asked somebody, "So how far are we going?" And they said 7, and I was thinking, 7? What does seven mean? And then I realized it was 7 miles. They were going 7 miles. And remember, I was used to running 2 or 3 miles. So I was like, oh my goodness. So I tried to keep up with them. I didn't, actually. I didn't make it the whole 7 miles. I had to walk the last mile or so. But I kept going back. I kept going back to that group, and every week they'd run a little further, and then you started training during the week, and I got so I could keep up with them, and we would go 8 miles, 10 miles, 12 miles. You get closer to the marathon, you're running 15 miles on a Sunday morning, and as you're running, 15 miles. Think of if you're doing 11 minutes a mile and you're doing 15 miles, you're running quite a long time. You're running a couple hours. And it's with a group, and you're running with other people. And so you're talking with these other people, and you're getting to know them. And as you're getting to know them, I was recognizing that I wasn't the only one there that was there for a physical reason that I was embarrassed about. Some people were trying to lose weight. Some people were trying to prepare for some event. There was different people, but we were there mostly because we felt like we were broken. We were there mostly because we felt like there was something about us that we wanted to improve. So we're trying to improve the pain that we were in. So in other words, it was a broken community, this group of runners. We were coming together based on our brokenness and trying to improve ourselves together. The third story, the blue zones. So I think probably everybody in this room knows about the blue zones. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the blue zones. They're listed here. Sardinia, at the tip of Italy, Icaria, Greece, Loma Linda, California, Okinawa, Japan, and the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. These are the places where people live long. Dan Buettner has studied these people. And as Dan Buettner did interviews of these centenarians, as he looked at their cultures, as he tried to understand why they were living longer, he identified 9 things, he calls them the Power 9, that these communities tend to do. So these are the 9 things. You can read them: move naturally, purpose, power, downshift, 80% rural, plant slant, friends at 5, right tribe, trying to read this. I should turn this way. Loved ones first and belong. So those are the Power 9. So if you look at those, they're actually divided into four areas. You can see this is one area, 2, 3, and 4. In my practice, my medical practice has 4 areas too. We call them our 4 pillars. And our 4 pillars, we call them nourish, move, renew, and connect. And that's basically the same 4 areas as the Power 9 are. And if you look at the Power 9, one of them is definitely move naturally. Another of them is renew, what we would call renew, downshift. That's managing stress. The other thing we talk about in renew is sleep. A third area for us is nourish. And there's 2 that are definitely about nourish. One is called plant slant. So they're pushing more of a plant-based approach to nutrition. And then the 80% rule, and that basically means you try not to get full. You try to stop eating before you're 100% full. And in Okinawa, that's where they specialize in this 80% rule. And they'll actually, as they sit down to eat, they'll actually say Hari Hachibu, which means as I eat this plate, I'm not going to get myself full. So it's something they do consciously as they start their meal. In our practice, when we talk about connect, we talk about 2 types of connection. We talk about a horizontal connection, which is your family and your friends and that type of connection. And then we talk about a vertical connection. A vertical connection is your spirituality, your connection to God or your purpose, whatever you consider your vertical connection to be. And so as I look at the Power 9, 5 of the Power 9 are actually in that connect area. So friends at 5, and the secret here is originally it was wine at 5, but wine's been a little bit disqualified, so now it's friends at 5. And then family first, belong, These are all components that are easily there in the, well, actually, right family first and right tribe are part of the horizontal connection, and the belong, which is your spiritual community, and know your purpose, that would be part of the vertical connection. So the blue zone communities, this idea of coming together and having a community is really an important part of their health. And in Okinawa, they call it the moai, M-O-A-I, the moai. And this is a social support group that, if you read this, it says it forms in order to provide varying support for social, financial, health, or spiritual interests. So these are groups that come together to support each other. And why do we support each other? Because we're broken, right? Things aren't going right, and we need other people around us to help us get through the tough times, whether it's financial tough times, spiritual tough times, health tough times, but someone to get us through those tough times. Okay, your story. Now, I don't know your story, but you know your story. And so we're going to just take a little bit of time here, some quiet time, so we'll do some pauses here for you to think of your story, where you are in life. Some of you have quite a few years under your belt. Some of you are earlier on in your journey, but think about your life. Think about your successes and your wins. What are the things that you are proud of, the things that you feel good about? And keep thinking in those positive areas, your strengths, talents you've been given, some of your best memories. And then we'll start thinking of some of the hard times as well. Some things that have been painful in your life. Some losses that you've had. Some things you might have shame around. Some things you're embarrassed of. Could be a low HDL cholesterol. Could be something quite a bit worse. Think about your shadows. While you're thinking about your pain and your losses, your shadows and your shames, I used to teach fourth-year medical students at Loma Linda University. It was a rotating group, so every month another 15 or 20 medical students would come in. And as I was teaching them, I would tell my story of when I was a medical student. So when I was a medical student, I entered medical school young. I was 21 years old, and I felt like the world was in front of me, and I could plan whatever I wanted to plan. And if I put my mind to it, if I worked hard, I could get there. And it felt to me like the right thing to do to approach life was to look at my strengths, the things I felt good about, and try to grow those and improve those and get them better. And then to look at my weaknesses, the things that I had shame about, and to try to get rid of those, to eliminate those. And I would tell the medical students that what I learned is every time I stepped outside, I could still see my shadow. So I never could get rid of those things that I was ashamed about. They were part of me. That shadow was always there. So we all have a shadow, right? I don't think there's anybody in this room that if the sun's shining, if the light is out, you go outside and you have a shadow, right? So we all have our strengths, and we all have our shadows. So this is a quote that I love. It's by Fay Vincent. He used to be the commissioner of baseball. And he says, baseball teaches us how to deal with failure. Failure is the norm in baseball. Those who hit safely in 1 out of 3 chances become star players. So 2/3 of the time you're failing, 1/3 of the time you're succeeding, and you're a star. Baseball alone in sport considers errors to be part of the game, part of its rigorous truth. So errors are part of the game. Our shadows are part of us. They're part of our reality. So to reorient ourselves here, we've talked a little bit about the Pentecost community, talked a little bit about my pain, talked a little bit about the Blue Zones, we've talked a little bit about your story, or at least in your mind you talked about your story. So let's keep going. Let's talk about Blue Zones Health. So I'm going to talk about Blue Zones Health version 1 and Blue Zones Health version 2. So 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, I left Loma Linda University and I started my own practice, my own primary care practice. And I did that because, number one, I was given a unique opportunity, but number two, I felt like we needed clinical models for lifestyle medicine. So this lifestyle medicine movement had started 10 years before that. It was growing. I was training residents in lifestyle medicine. The residents were going out to practice, and they would say, Dr. Dysinger, you trained me how to do lifestyle medicine, but I can't find a place where I really do it. I can't find a job that allows me to practice lifestyle medicine. And people were coming into the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and they were saying, this is my tribe, these are the people I want to work with, this is how I want to practice medicine. They were loving actually reversing disease. It was beautiful what the results you could get with lifestyle medicine, but then they were saying, how do I make a living doing that? How do I make a living doing lifestyle medicine? So I was given this unique opportunity 10 years ago. I left Loma Linda, I started my own practice, and I developed, it was a lot of work, took a lot of time, but we developed a way that we practiced lifestyle medicine. So this is one of the exam rooms in my office. It doesn't look like a typical doctor's room. Most of what we do in our clinic is currently called Lifestyle Medical. Most of the things that we do in our clinic don't look like typical doctor's offices, right? So we spend a lot of time talking to our patients. We spend a lot of time trying to share deeply with them, get them to share deeply with us. We want to hear their stories. We want to know what their life has been like from the early days. We want to know how they came to the place that they are now in life. If they're struggling, say they're addicted to cheese. They love cheese, and we need to help them lower their cholesterol. We need to know their story to help them make a decision to stay away from cheese. So we have to really understand these people. So that's what we do in our Lifestyle Medical, what we're calling Blue Zones Health version 1. So to do that, it's something that I can't do by myself. I have to have a community of people who are helping my patients. And we have to have the patients as part of that community. So in our clinic, we have a dietitian, we have a fitness trainer, we have a social worker, we have spiritual support people, we have certified health coaches, we have medical assistants who help with care navigation through the complex health system. And then we have patients who mentor other patients. So if you've been in our practice for a while, you have the opportunity to help a patient who's coming in understand our 4 core pillars, understand how we approach those, understand some of the details, and just support, because we need community, right? We need community if we're going to get healthy. In our practice, we have lots of groups. Every week we have several groups. We used to have all of our groups in person. When COVID came, we switched to everything was online. Now we have a bit of a mix. We have some in person, some online. More are online than are in person. But we have what we call our support groups. Support groups are where you come every week and you check in on your 4 pillars. So you tell everyone else in the group, this is how I'm doing in movement. This is how I'm doing in resilience or stress management. This is how I'm sleeping. This is how I'm feeling connected to my family or to my friends. That's our support group. And then as you leave the support group, you make a commitment. So this week, I'm going to try to go to bed by 9 o'clock every night. Or this week, I'm going to eat a cup of beans for breakfast at least 5 times. So you make those kind of commitments. That's our support group. We also have meditation groups to help with stress. We have cooking classes to help with nourishment. We have stretch and yoga classes to help with movement. We have fasting groups that will do fasting together. We have what's called our social worker runs something called our health behavior change group, where she tries to teach people, she tries to help people understand what in their journey, what in their story makes it hard for them to change. So most of us, probably most people in this room, have a story of something that you wanted to do and you never quite did it. So why is that? And that's what the health behavior change group is about. And then we have other kinds of programs as well. So this is a different way of approaching primary care. We're calling it Blue Zones Health version 1. So back to my story. So I was there with the Lopers. We were training for marathons. We were running several hours together every Sunday morning. And this is my son. His name's Stephen. This picture was taken when he was 13 years old. And my son said, "Dad, my back's hurting." So, I'm a doctor. I examine his back. He's just starting his growth spurt, so I figure, well, it's part of his growing pains. So, I massage his back. It doesn't seem like a big deal. And he gets better. But then a few days later, "Dad, my back's hurting." So I gave him some Tylenol, some ibuprofen, and it seemed like he got better. And then a few days later, my back's hurting. So I took him to actually a friend of mine who was a chiropractor. It's the back. I figured, well, see what the chiropractor says. The chiropractor evaluated it, and he said, "Yeah, I don't think it's a musculoskeletal problem." And I was like, I don't know. He's 13 years old. He's a healthy kid. Long story short, we eventually took him to a doctor. The doctor examined him and said, "We need some blood work and we need an X-ray." And Stephen, he said, "No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do the blood work. I don't want to do the X-ray." And I said, so we were in an upstairs building. I said, "Stephen, if you can run down to the bottom of the stairs and back up, you don't have to do the blood work." He ran down to the bottom of the stairs. He couldn't get all the way back up. So he said, "Okay, I'll do the blood work." So he did the blood work, and it came back normal. The blood work all looked normal. He didn't want to do the X-ray. A day or so later, I forget the circumstance, but for some reason I said, well, I'm going to listen to his lungs, because I'd never listened to his lungs. I said, I'm going to listen to his lungs. I listened to his lungs, and I couldn't even hear any lung sounds on one side of his lung. So I knew that was not a good sign. So I said, "Stephen, we got to go do the X-ray." Did the X-ray. Sure enough, one side of his lung was whited out. Long story short, he got a CT scan, and turns out he had cancer. It had started as a muscle in his back, and it was wrapped around his kidney. It was a pretty good-sized tumor. One of the worst days of my life, to know that my son had cancer, and it was not a good-looking cancer. It was a tough cancer. So he had to have surgery to get a tissue diagnosis. It came back as a rhabdomyosarcoma. Again, it's a muscle cancer. And that rhabdomyosarcoma, there's 4 different types of rhabdomyosarcoma. His was the most aggressive type. So it was a type of cancer that didn't have good odds. But I'm a doctor. We had a lot of connections. I actually happened to have a cousin who worked at the NIH in Washington, D.C., and he was an oncologist. So we immediately called him, and he looked up the latest protocols and we started. So he had started with chemotherapy, and he went through that for several months, and then he had to have what was called a debulking surgery. So the chemotherapy actually worked really, really well. His tumor shrunk very, very rapidly. It shrunk so that you could really hardly see anything on the CT scan anymore. But then you had to have surgery to take out this last little bit that was there. So they did that, and then they started radiation therapy because that was sort of supposed to finally get rid of it. And again, it felt like we were having success. But Stephen started having trouble with consciousness, actually. He would start passing out. And turns out that the tumor had spread to the meninges, the lining of his spinal cord, and was now going to his brain. And so 7 months after his diagnosis, Stephen passed. So I tried to keep running with my running group, and I couldn't. I'd actually stopped this well before Stephen passed because I felt like I shouldn't be out running for 2 hours at a time when my son had cancer. So we're going to come back to that story. I'm going to go back to the Blue Zone story, the Blue Zone's communities. So 5 areas that Blue Zones are known for as far as their connection, right? 3 horizontal and 2 vertical connections. The first one we're going to talk about is loved ones first. So this is the idea of prioritizing family. So keeping your parents close as they get older. My mom just passed 2.5 months ago. She lives in Tennessee. 2 of my brothers live on the same property as her. She was 91 years old when she died. She would have never lived. She would have died, I'm sure, several years ago if my brothers and their family, if they hadn't all been together. So it's a blessing to the parents. It's also a blessing to the kids, and it sets a good example of how the kids can help you as you get older. So the idea of committing to a life partner, it adds years to our expectancy. And we already talked about investing in children with time and love so that they'll be more likely to invest in you. So loved ones first is one of these community building things that we can do that will give us a chance to live better longer. That's one of the things that the Blue Zones communities do. Second one is the right tribe. So the right tribe is your friend network. So who are you close to? Who do you share with? And the idea here is that our behaviors are contagious. So if we're around people that enjoy walking, we're going to enjoy walking more likely. If we're around people that are good at eating healthy, it's more likely we're going to be able to eat healthy. So you have to surround yourself with the kind of people that are doing the kinds of things that you want to be doing. The third area, we already talked about friends at 5, but there's something underneath this friends at 5. It's that we're conscious about how we get together with other people. So it could be a relaxed dinner with family or friends, or it could be a lot more. So how many of you were at the gala last night? I know several people here were at the gala last night. We heard an amazing talk by Dr. Amit Sood around. It was around a lot of things, around certainly about renewal, but one of the things that he said the thing that we're going to feel the best about is if we're caring and serving and helping other people. And this is part of what Friends at 5 is about, is caring and serving and helping other people. When life is said and done, when you think back on your story, the things that you're thinking that you're proud of, hopefully some of it was caring for other people, because that's your legacy. That's what you're going to be known for. So Friends at 5 brings that in as well. So those are the three horizontal connections. And then there's the vertical connections. So one is belonging. So Dan Buettner, when he created the Blue Zones, when he was setting up the idea of the Blue Zones, he interviewed 263 centenarians, 258 of them, so all but 5 of them were actively part of a faith-based community. It didn't really matter what community. Some of them, these are dramatically different cultures, so the denomination didn't matter as much as the fact that they were worshiping something bigger than them in a community. So they were coming together as a community. It's one of the beautiful things that I felt this morning when I was here at church. This Seventh-day Adventist community was worshiping together, and know that that's good for your health. So the data shows it can add 4 to 14 years to your life if you attend services regularly 4 times a month on average. So that's a vertical connection, a spiritual belonging. It's horizontal and vertical both. And then the Blue Zones communities also tend to have a purpose. So if you're a member of a Blue Zones community, you have a purpose. So in Okinawa, they call it ikigai. And this is what ikigai is. So it's taking what you love, taking what you're good at, taking what you can actually make a living at, taking what the world needs. So you're putting together your vocation, your profession, your passion, your mission, and that's your purpose. That's your ikigai. So we all need an ikigai. We all need that purpose in life. We need that spiritual or that vertical connection that tells us how we're doing and where we're going. In Costa Rica, they call it the plan de vida. So it's our plan for living. It's why we wake up in the morning. And again, if you have a purpose, it can add up to 7 years of life. So these are the Blue Zones communities, and these are the ways they connect. And again, there's 9 areas, 1 on movement, 1 on stress management, 2 on nourishment, and 5 on community. So know that community is important for your health. Okay, so we've finished the Blue Zones community story. We still have to go back and finish the Pentecost community and the Wayne's Pain story. And we're going to spend a little bit more time on your stories, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about Blue Zones Health version 2, and then we'll be done. So back to the Pentecost community. This is the text that we read in the beginning. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, the fellowship, the breaking of bread, and the prayers, and awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs. So remember, this community was a broken community, right? They were totally, they were hiding in these rooms. They were terrified of the Roman soldiers. They didn't know what to do. And in that community, I'm sure they were sharing their fears. They were sharing their shame. They were sharing the pain that they were having. They were sharing their brokenness in that community. And out of that community came this movement, this Christian movement that changed the world probably more than any small community's ever done. Awe and wonder coming from every soul. So it was this broken community. It's not by chance that the symbol is a broken heart. It's this broken community, a broken flaming heart. That's what the Pentecost community was, and that's what changed the world. So a couple other quotes just highlighting this. I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think of others, for as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ and individually members one of another, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us. So sometimes when we see these gifts that differ, it doesn't feel good, right? So we see someone who's maybe broken in a different way than we are, who's maybe not functioning at a level of health that we think they should be functioning. Or maybe they just have a different personality than us. But it's these differences that actually make our strengths. It's these differences that actually allow broken communities to be strong. One more quote, more than that, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope. Hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit. For while we were still weak, that's when Christ died for us. But it's while we're still weak that we can have God's love poured into us. So it's that brokenness. It's this space in the heart, this broken space in the heart, that God can be poured into us. That's where our vertical connection is. That's where we can connect to other people through that brokenness. That's certainly where we can connect to God. So, back to my story. So Stephen had died. I gained about 20 pounds of weight. People were bringing in food. Food was a comfort to me. I'd let go of the fact that I was going to do a marathon. I wasn't doing really any exercise. And that running community came to me and they said, Wayne, we've got to get out again. We've got to get out again. And I said, I can't run. I can't. And they said, that's okay. We'll walk with you. And they did. And I did. And we started walking and eventually started running again. So a year after Stephen died, I ran a marathon with those lopers around me. I ran it with a picture of Stephen on my chest. The weight came off, and I kept going with that community that had formed around brokenness. And eventually I even ran an Ironman because that community was helping me move forward. They were taking me in my brokenness, they were accepting me, and they were helping me move forward. So this is a picture, this is a recent picture. This is my friend John. He's also a lifestyle medicine physician. This was my most recent marathon, which was about a year ago. It was a hike more than a marathon, but it was a good experience. So that community continues to exist for me and continues to support me. And it's a community that I feel safe in because they know me as a person. They know my strengths and my weaknesses. They know my victories. They know my shadows, and they accept me for that. So let's go back to your story. And as you're thinking about your story, I want to read a couple quotes here. So this quote says, God comes through the wounds, our very imperfections, what religion labels our sins, what therapy calls our sickness, what philosophy terms our errors. Those are precisely what brings us closer to the reality that no matter how hard we try to deny it, we are not the ones in control here. And this realization inevitably and joyously brings us closer to God. God comes through the wounds. So I was raised in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I was not raised to open up my wounds, to show people my wounds. That's not the religion I was raised in. But God comes to us through those wounds. God comes to us through these places that we're broken, through these places that we feel shame, that we're not feeling close to anybody around. But that's where God comes to us. And that's where we need to go to find community. We need to go to places that we're accepted for who we are, places that we can share deeply, places that we can open our hearts up, that we can tell them the worst things about us, and they'll still put their arms around us. They'll wrap us up. They'll be our moy, our place where we belong, our place where we're safe. That's what's healing about community. So I want to tell one other story before I leave this slide. So this is a story about a puppet master And this was one of those puppet shows where there's strings, right? So the puppet master has strings on his fingers, and each string goes down and moves the puppet. So he's there moving the puppets, and one of the strings breaks. He ties the string back up. He's moving the puppets again, another string breaks. He ties the string back up, moving the puppets, another string breaks. He ties the string back up, and somebody says, "How come your strings keep breaking?" And he says, "What matters is that each time they break, I tie them up again. And each time I tie them up, they're a little closer to me." That's what God does with us. When we break, he ties a string and he makes us a little closer to him. God comes to us through our wounds. He comes to us through our brokenness. And that's how our communities can help us heal. That's how our communities can go out into the world and help the world heal. So we're almost done. I think 2 more slides. So Blue Zones Health 2. So my practice, we were struggling along but having some successes. And a couple years ago, some more business guys showed up, and they said, "We like what you're doing. There's some opportunities here. Let's work together and create something bigger." Long story short, this second group that's come to us, we started working with Dan Buettner and the Blue Zones Institute, and we ended up signing a contract, and we are now rebranding ourselves to Blue Zones 2. This is starting in 2025, so the word's not even public yet. You guys are hearing it before anybody else hears it. And the intent of Blue Zones Health 2, or what I'm calling Blue Zones Health version 2, but it's really the first Blue Zones Health because my original practice was not called Blue Zones Health. But the intent of Blue Zones Health is to say health is more than, is your cholesterol the right number? Are we reversing your diabetes? Health is more than that. Health is community. 5 of the 9 parts of a Blue Zones community have nothing to do with what we would typically consider health, right? They're community building kinds of things. So health is way more than getting the blood pressure under control. It's way more than making sure your ankle sprain heals correctly. So we want to create this community within Blue Zones Health that coalesces around our brokenness, that coalesces around these opportunities to heal ourselves and help heal others. So the purpose of this slide, this guy Robert Waldinger, he's the director of this thing called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. So the Harvard Study of Adult Development started in 1938, so a long time ago. It started with 724 men. They were divided into 2 groups. The first group were undergraduate students at Harvard. So these were smart, educated, motivated people. And then it paired them with people from Boston neighborhoods. And it was generally not wealthy Boston neighborhoods. It was generally sort of underserved, hard-scrabble Boston neighborhoods. And it took these people and it started following them. And it looked at a lot of different things. It looked at health parameters. It looked at just their journey through life, their relationships. It started looking at their spouses. It's now looking at their kids. And you can go to TED Talks and listen to this talk. If you haven't listened to it, I'd recommend that you do that. But the bottom line of this talk is that health, to achieve health, relationships trumped everything else. So it's those connections, those communities that you have, that right tribe, that belonging, that family first. It was those people that allowed you to really achieve health. It was more important than your blood pressure, more important than your blood sugar, more important than anything that went on in your life was those relationships. So there's one more slide. I don't know why it's not going. So the last slide is a slide of okay. So this slide is if you can read here, it's healing circle and talking circle in primary care. So this is the American Indians. They would have what they called their healing circles. So if someone was struggling, they would come together in a circle, usually around a fire, and they would talk through the challenges of that person. Everybody would. So one person would give an opinion, the other person, the person who was struggling was there in the circle. They would share how they were feeling, and out of those circles would come healing. So my challenge to you is to make this church a healing circle. Make your life, if you're not a member of this church, make your life a place that's part of a healing circle, and to allow that healing circle to be built on a broken community, not a perfect community. Be vulnerable. Share your shadow as well as your strength. Accept the shadow as well as the strength of other people. And I feel like that's where healing's going to come. That's how the whole world is going to become a blue zone. And that's what a healing community is about. So thank you. Sure, yeah, I can take a question or two.
Yeah, yellow and maybe red. I know that we started late, so I want to give you, your due. So does anyone have a question for Dr. Dysinger? Yes, okay, over here. Excellent.
I was just curious if you could expand a little bit on the wine thing, because a lot of times when we read about the blue zones, it still seems to have that, sort of positive view of having a glass of wine with a meal. And have they actually changed that?
So they haven't. The Blue Zones, company still uses wine at 5. We told them that, if you'd asked me about wine 20 years ago, I would have said, well, the science is maybe iffy. But I feel like over the last 20 years, the science has become pretty clear that wine is not health promoting. So the Blue Zones community, and we told them if we're going to be Blue Zones Health, we can't promote wine at 5. That's not an option for us. And they said that's fine. There are other people who've worked with Blue Zones who've used this Friends at 5 rather than wine at 5, because that's their sort of term, is wine at 5. And so we said, well, okay, that's what we're going to use. We haven't really dug into the science or tried to force anything, because within even the wine at 5, but especially if you put Friends at 5, there's a lot of beautiful things that can be supported, and so that's what we're pushing into. It'll be an interesting journey. I don't know what they'll do, but the first time I asked them, they said, well, this Power 9, it's copyrighted, and it's copyrighted at wine at 5, and so we don't want to go through the work of changing that. So I don't know.
Because I did notice the little wine glass in the diagram.
Right, and I obviously pasted over, because it says it says wine at 5, and I pasted over Friends at 5. So. A little cup of coffee. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, we chose to, even when you read the Blue Zones literature, a lot of what it talks about is not the actual wine. It's about this fellowship, this getting together, this sort of working together, this service or caring. So we're just focusing on that and trying not to, we're what do we say, accept people who have differences. So we're just going forward that way.
Okay, Maria?
So lately in the news, we've seen more of an awareness brought towards social media and like the addiction our phones can have on us. Should we be talking more about it? Do you think it's as a health crisis as much as they're saying? Should we talk more about it, less about it? What do you think? Like in 20 years, are we going to look back and think, whoa, these devices in our hands were extremely addictive and really bad? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great, great question. It's a superbly important question. And, you know, one of the things that we're talking about is in Blue Zones Health is having our patients make commitments. And one of the commitments that we're talking about having them make is to spend 4 hours every week where you're screen-free. It has to be 4 hours continuous where you don't. And to be honest, I haven't tried that in my own life yet. It's actually not
Never done that.
easy when you think about it. But it's you know, it's talking to the kind of thing that you're talking about. You know, the Facebooks and Instagrams and TikToks of the world, they make their money by how long you look at their screen. And they're very sophisticated at how they get you to look at their screen. And so it is dangerous, and it does affect our health. There's a lot of controversy as far as how much, but I personally feel like it's real, and I personally feel like we should be. I mean, it's called social media, but it's actually pulling us apart. Real social connection is the kinds of things that we're doing in this room right now.
Just to follow up. You said 4 hours, and they have to be consistently. Why would you say 4 hours? Is there like a special thing about 4 hours?
There was not science behind that. It's just a token. We got to try to remember that we don't have to have that phone in front of us every moment.
So if I go to the doctor and my blood pressure is, what would be a high one? 180 over 90 or something like that, and my cholesterol is 250, she will say, boy, you're in immediate need of some intervention, else I'm going to suffer a cardiac event or a stroke event or something. Now, you've said that the community ones are even more important, so if that's true, are there measurable indicators that you need immediate intervention, and what would those interventions be?
So another great question, really, really good question. So in the lifestyle medicine world, we talk about lifestyle medicine being our first treatment. It doesn't mean that we don't use medications. It doesn't mean that we don't need immediate interventions in certain emergency situations. So depending on the situation, you know, maybe the right thing's a pill. Maybe the right thing is you go to the emergency room, they give you something IV. There's a variety of potential right things depending on the situation. But I would tell you that if your doctor is a good primary care doctor, your doctor is going to know you well. And your doctor is going to know, number one, is this an unusual blood pressure for you, or is this a typical blood pressure for you? And your doctor is going to know, when you get stressed, does your blood pressure go high, or does your blood pressure stay pretty even when you get stressed? And they're going to be able to bring those kinds of things onto the table as they're analyzing this blood pressure of 190 over or 180 over 90. And then they're going to be able to so I have one patient, his blood pressure will commonly be at those kind of numbers. But I know him well, and I know that those blood pressures will go down as soon as he goes out of my office. So I don't spend a lot of time talking to him about his blood pressures, because his wife will send me his blood pressures when he gets home. And they're good blood pressures. So yes, that community, that relationship, that connection matters a lot as far as what a good primary care doctor is going to do for the blood pressure. Now, if you don't have that connection with your primary care doctor, they're not going to know, and you're going to probably end up in the ER, and then you're going to go through all the medical things, which is going to scare you more. And your blood pressure is going to go even higher because you're scared because of all these things that the medical system is doing to you. But eventually they'll get it down, and then you'll be relieved, and things will go on. But the point is, yes, we do push into the more medical stuff at times, but a lot of what we deal with, the estimate is 80% of what we deal with, can be treated without those more aggressive medical interventions. And that's what Blue Zones Health is about.
So mine is just a comment about, you talked about the coming together of these broken people in order to fellowship and find healing. So how do we find a balance, especially if we want to implement something like this, like in a church community, so that we don't end up with a bunch of broken people? Like, are there principles, are there recommendations you can make on how such groups can thrive?
Well, the thing, so great question, the great question, and the thing that I'll say two things. First off is to remind ourselves of the Pentecost community and what they accomplished. And I don't think they came together focused on principles. I think they came together because they knew about this man Jesus, and they knew that something was going to come out of that. And then my running group, we didn't come together based on principles. We had a training schedule. We had certain goals that we were after, but we came together around our brokenness, and then it sort of played out. So that's a little bit sidestepping your question, because it's actually a very good question. If you're going to bring a bunch of broken people together, how do you go forward? And so, I mean, what Blue Zones Health is going to do is what we're already doing in our practice. So this group, this community is about fasting, and we're gonna go through this fasting together. But we're going to do that in a way that's vulnerable. We're going to do that in a way that's supportive of each other. We're going to do that in a way that's not very judgmental, and we're going to accomplish this fasting task together. And as we do that, so when we have our fasting groups, we've ended up creating certain guidelines. So you can have 400 calories of nuts every day when you're doing the fasting. You can use turmeric, but you can't use pepper on your flavorings of your food. So we ended up setting guidelines. So I guess just take the step. That's what I would encourage you to do. Just take the step. You don't need to have everything figured out. Just take the step with that open heart, with that vulnerability, with that desire to heal yourself and to heal others, because you're in that community not just for yourself, but to help others, that caring and that serving. And then, have a goal, but then allow it to evolve. So if the last time you got together didn't work so well, say, well, let's adjust it for the next time. I don't know if that's a great answer to your question, but it hopefully it gives you a little bit of a thought. Yeah.
Maybe one more. Otherwise, okay. Eldon, we'll get you, and then we'll take like a 1-minute break, and then we'll get Dr. Ramirez set up, and we'll get moving forward here.
Hi. Could you give your opinion on the effectiveness of, say, virtual support groups? Because, personally, I hate social media, but I have a lot of friends that I've known since, say, since elementary school. And even though we've geographically moved apart, we're still always talking online. So do you find that kind of interaction has the same or some reduced level of the benefit in terms of benefits from a Friends at Five standpoint?
Yeah, no, it's another great question. We've had a lot of great questions. And we don't really know. I mean, just like we don't know for sure, there's benefits to social media, there's also downsides. We don't really know virtual group. I mean, the science on this is still evolving. What we do as a practice is we say we're happy to do our visits virtually, but once a year we want you to come in person, because we do believe that human interaction, that physical touch, that energy that you feel in the presence of somebody, we feel like that's valuable. So, but a lot of our visits we do virtually. A lot of our groups we do virtually, and so I do think it's a great resource that we have that we didn't have even just a few years ago, and we should take advantage of that, because you can connect virtually with that group. So it's a group of your friends. Will you get together, or is it one-on-one?
I mean, both really. But
Yeah.
for example, like we have group spaces where it's like there's like 15 of us that we've all known each other, and we're just always talking with each other, like updating, like, hey, you know, this is what's happened, or like, you know, this is what happens at work, or you know, yada yada.
Yeah, no, that's, I have to believe that's good. I have to believe that's mainly valuable. But still find a time where all 15 of you can go out to dinner together or something like that as well.
Yes, I believe that in person is always best. And so to everyone live streaming and who'll be watching this later, we're glad you could do that, but we wish you were here. Okay, and I guess we do have one more, Dr. Dysinger. Just one second here. Dr. Marina.
I do a lot of work with the Amish people in my area for the last 20 or 30 years. They do not have social media at all in the conservative way. They do not have telephones. Some of the more modern ones may, but traditionally no. How do they get by with very close relationships? And that's something we have to think about. One, they letter write. They always write. They always keep that connection. They keep, anytime there's a wedding or a funeral or any time, no matter where they are, they will make sure they get there. And they will take several days sometimes to get to a place, but they will get there. So and I do believe the personal atmosphere is just 10 times more, because I see it acted out in them as a close community that keep together with those simple means.
Yeah, it's a good story of family first, too. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so it is now 3:17 and 31 seconds, so I will give you probably till 3:19. I'm going to be generous, but we will be back here. So if you know, the bathrooms are out the door or whatever, and just take a stretch, we'll get the computers back online, and I'll see you at 3:20. Or did I say 3:19? 3:20, something like that. Yeah, round it up, yep.